We are looking at the book of Esther, the only book in the Bible that never mentions God by name. And yet, his fingerprints are all over it, as we've already seen. Esther has discovered that she's been placed in her position for a spiritual reason, not merely for personal benefit. Mordecai, her cousin, has said, you've been called to the kingdom for such a time as this, that God's whole plan in making you pretty, God's whole plan in you being chosen out of all the possible females in the kingdom, God's whole plan was that you would be here at this time, for this moment, for his kingdom purpose. And she, after thinking about it for a moment, said, okay, I'm going to go to the king and tell him about Haman's plan to destroy all the Jews, and if I perish, I perish. She now prepares dinner for the king and invites Haman, the architect of genocide, because she's ready to tell the king and spill the beans on him at the dinner banquet. The king says to her, as we saw last time, Esther, chapter 5, verse 6, what did you have to tell me? Esther says, my petition and my request is, and she stops. She doesn't get it out. She can't say it. She backs off. She says, my request is for you to have dinner again with me tomorrow. Something happened that caused her to pause in her request for deliverance. The question is, why did she stop? Why didn't she just come out and say it? I mean, she began the whole sentence, my petition is, and then she backed up. If Esther would have finished the sentence at that time, those things in the planning of God would not have occurred in the sequence God wanted them to occur. And therefore, although she was going to do the right thing, it was the wrong time. Because you see, as we looked at chapter 6 last time, Haman is going to leave her presence. He's going to run across Mordecai. Mordecai will not bow. That's going to tick Haman off. Haman's going to go ticked off to his wife. His wife is going to say, you don't have to take that. You don't have to take that. He comes in and he says, everything is going good for me, but this Jew guy, he won't bow to me. Well, you don't have to take that. Why don't you put him on the gallows tomorrow? Haman said, that's really great. I'm going to put him on the gallows tomorrow, get rid of this guy, solve it once and for all. The king goes to bed. The king can't sleep. The king is tossing and turning. When the king is tossing and turning, he tells the servant, go get a boring book for me to read so that when I read the boring book, I will go to sleep. So they bring him the boring book, and by luck, they just happened to turn to the page that dealt with Mordecai. Mordecai had saved the king's life earlier. The king wants to know, what did we do for the guy who saved my life? No, we didn't do anything for the guy who saved my life. As chance would have it, Haman comes in right when the king is talking to the servant about Mordecai who had saved his life, and the king asks, well, what should I do, Haman, with somebody who saves the king's life? But he doesn't mention the name Mordecai. Because he doesn't mention the name Mordecai, Haman thinks he's talking about him. So Haman says, well, what you ought to do with the guy who saves your life is make him number 2 in the kingdom, so he's the heir apparent to the rule. Well, I like that idea. Why don't you go and go ahead and get Mordecai so I can put him in that position, and why don't you lead his horse throughout the land and proclaim him as second in command? It just so happened that during the pause, which produced the delay, which produced the movement, which produced Mordecai's rejection, which produced Haman's angry wife, which produced Haman wanting to put the gallows together, which produced a sleepless night, which produced a boring book, which produced the name Mordecai, which produced not mentioning his name, which produced him being elevated, which produced Haman having to take him across through the street, which produced God, the puppet master, pulling things together to bring about his timing. He goes home at the end of chapter 6 after leading Mordecai through the street. And he depressed. This is a Prozac moment. He's depressed. Because he's leading the future king, and he was supposed to be the future king. And so he goes home. And he just cries out, mourning with his head covered, verse 12. His wife says to him in verse 13, boy, you're in trouble now. No, you lead Mordecai through here, and he's the Jew. Don't look good for you. Verse 14, while. Somebody say while. That's a time word. That's a time word. While. While his wife telling him it don't look good. While he's crying with his head covered because it don't look good. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Now this is the second banquet. Esther had prepared a second banquet because God blocked her from doing the first banquet. While his wife was telling him it doesn't look good and he's mourning, the eunuch comes in and says, come on, you got to hurry up. It's time for the banquet. Why is that important that happened while? Because that didn't give him time to come up with a plan. It didn't give him time to run and flee. It didn't give him time to escape. God had that thing clicking so that one thing happens right after another so that there could be no interjection to change the program of God. He tells the eunuch, go get him now. Because God's got a plan to keep and a program to execute. So he goes to the dinner. So the king says, okay, Esther. I mean, you've been saying for the last 24 hours, you got to tell me something. What is it? So she tells him, O king, this is chapter 7 now. O king, at the end of verse 3, if it pleases the king, let my life be given to me and my petition, and my people, as my request. Save my life, king. Save the life of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If they were going to sell me as slaves, I would have lived with that. But no, they want to kill me. So the king asked the queen, who is he? They want to kill my wife and kill my wife's people. Who are you talking about? And not only who is he, verse 5, but where is he? Well, who is he and where is he? Guess who's coming to dinner? Who is he? Where is he? Who would presume to do thus? Who are you talking about? Here it is, verse 6, chapter 7. Esther said, a foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman became terrified before the king and queen. That'll shake you up. She says, this man who I invited to dinner wants to kill me, your wife, kill my people. Okay. Rewind. If she would have told him the first time, when he wasn't mad at Haman, when he wasn't mad at Mordecai, when he had built the gallows for Mordecai, when Mordecai had not been elevated to be the second in command in the future, the king would have had a totally different mood about the situation. Because now Mordecai's relationship to the king has changed. Mordecai's relationship to Esther and the king has changed. Everything has been reconvened and redone to fulfill the timing purposes of God. And he's not finished yet. She says, Haman, that's who wants to get rid of me. Oh, the king is hot, verse 7. He's ticked off. Says with anger, he went into the palace garden. Now watch this. Verse 8 says, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. He's falling on the couch, verse 7 says, begging for his life. So the king is hot. The king walks out. King doesn't even know what to say now. He's so mad that Haman planned to do this. Esther is laying on the couch, reclining on the couch. Ain't too proud to beg. You remember that? He pleading for his life. He goes over to Esther and falls on her and says, please, Esther, please. Don't let him kill me. Don't let him kill me. It says, now when the king returned from the garden, oh, you get the picture, into the place where they were drinking wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, now he already hot. Then the king said, will you even assault the queen with me in the house? Oh, you got to be kidding me. Wait a minute. You already told me you want to kill my wife. Now you all up on her. No, no, you didn't. You gonna assault my wife with me in the house? Now, that's not what he was doing. He was begging for his life, the scripture says, okay? God is so particular, he will create impressions. God is so nuanced that he will make something look like it's not really that in order to accomplish his purpose, because the king comes in just in time. Oh, but he's not finished yet. Because after the king comes in and sees what he's doing, then, verse 9, then is a time word. You got while, you got now, you got then. Then, Harbonah, one of the eunuchs who was before the king, said, behold, indeed, the gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. And the king said, hang him on it. All right, so guess what? God delayed Esther from telling the king to give Haman time to get mad so that he would build a gallows for Mordecai in order that he might dig his own grave. God will let unbelievers express their anger against believers and use that very thing to destroy the unbeliever from destroying the believer, and it's all got to do with time. It's all got to do with God nuancing time. It says, so they hanged him on the gallows. Now I want you to notice something else about time. Verse 8. When the king comes in and see him, what he thinks is assaulting his wife, a nuance, really wasn't happening, but it looked that way. As the word went out of the king's mouth, why are you assaulting my wife? They covered Haman's face. While the words were coming out of the king's mouth, they come, see, you gotta read every word of the Bible. While the word was coming out of the king's mouth, they covered his face. They didn't give him a chance to explain. Because this was a time of judgment. And so you're not even going to be given the chance to say you were begging. Soon as he finished the last word, boom, cover it up, take it out. Because when God moves suddenly against your enemies, when God moves suddenly on your behalf because you are sensitive to his will and his timing, he can move with lightning speed. So they hanged him on the gallows that was prepared for Mordecai, and the king's anger subsided. The problem is there's a law out there that says all the Jews are to be exterminated. The laws of the Medes and the Persians meant it was a law you could not change. It was a fixed law in the society of Medo-Persian Empire. God is a God of reversals. He can reverse things on a dime that appear to be irreversible. Let me show you some of the reversals in chapter 8. Reversal number 1. On that day, verse 1, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Okay, I'll call that economic reversal. All that Haman owned now belonged to Esther. You know, the scripture says the inheritance of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. When God gets ready to move and to make a statement in the economic order of things, he can flip that thing for you, to you, through you, by you on a dime. All that Haman owned, now Esther, is yours. We done switched because he was a rich man. He put up all that money to kill the Jews. Okay, verse 2. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. We'll call that political reversal. You see, the signet ring was the ring of authority. It was the ring in chapter 3, verse 10. Then the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. The signet ring was the ring of authority where you could represent the king officially. He said, give that ring to Mordecai. Wait a minute, Mordecai was a dead man walking. Now he's second in command with the king's ring. That means he carried clout. That means he carried juice. That means he carried some authority with him. So God can change things on a dime. You think your boss has the final say. You think the powers that be have the final say. You think those unscrupulous co-workers who are plotting against you have the final say. You think because they have the name, have the money, have the position, they have the final say. They don't have a thing unless God gives it to them. And the God who gives it can take it away. The point is simply that, I keep telling y'all, you only have one source. If you ever get that in your head, if it ever burns into your skull, that nobody, I don't care who they are, has the final say-so over a Christian living by the Spirit in the will of God. Nobody. Which means you never live a threatened life. I know things can be threatening, but you never live a threatened life as though they have the final say. Because they do not. So there was a political shift. Then coming off of that was a legal shift. She said, if it please the king, if I found favor in your sight, verse 7, if it seems proper, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman. Haman had a letter, kill all the Jews. She said, king, do something about this letter, revoke it. The problem is the laws of the Medes and Persians were irrevocable. So what's the king to do? How can I endure the calamity? Haman's dead, but we still got the problem which will befall my people. How can I endure seeing the destruction of my people? Why? Because God's kingdom program is always bigger than you. And so what are we going to do about all this? He says, well, I've given the authority to Mordecai. So here's what I want you to do, verse 8. I want you to write to the Jews as you see fit in the king's name and seal it with the king's signet. So I want you to write. So the king's scribe were called and they began to write. What do they write? Because we got an unchangeable law. Verse 11. In them the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city the right to assemble and to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, to annihilate, to an entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children and women, and to plunder their spoil. Okay, now follow this. Haman's law, every Jew got to be killed. The law can't be changed. So the king tells Esther, y'all come up with something. put my seal on it. They come up with the law. The law says, signed by the king, while I can't change the law that you got to be killed, I can make another law. I'm going to write an executive order. Since that's big these days, I'm going to write an executive order. And on this executive order, all Jews have the right to defend themselves against anybody who would try to kill them. And if they try to kill you, you not only can defend yourself, you can kill their wives and children. Now, if I'm one of the Persians operating on law number 1, where the Jews could not defend themselves, and now I hear there is another law that doesn't cancel that I can kill them, but gives them permission to kill me back. Not only do they have permission to kill me back, they have the permission to go after my wife, my childrens. They got permission to destroy my household. Now I'm rethinking law number 1 because I got to deal with law number 2. See, God has an override button that can take what Satan has planned against you. People he's raised up against you. Circumstances that look not in your favor. And when he pushes override, it may not stop their evil from being evil, but God gives you something. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the scripture says he will raise up a standard against them. He will push an override button. So there was a legal reversal. Oh, but it's not all. There was an emotional reversal. You see, because in chapter 4, verse 3, it says there was great mourning among the Jews, weeping and wailing. That's when the first law was passed. But when the second law was passed and the carriers sent the message out that the Jews could take care of themselves, it says in verse 16, for the Jews there was light and gladness and joy and honor. Oh, wait a minute. You're crying one day and you're laughing the next. Oh, the Bible says, sorrow may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. You may be crying today, but don't think that's how it's going to be when you wake up tomorrow. Not when God has jumped into the situation. God can wipe tears away. He can turn pain into pleasure. He can turn sadness into joy when we are operating with his reversal principles, operating with his timing, operating, submitting to his will, and listening to his voice. Oh, but it's not over yet, because there's one other thing. The last verse of chapter 8 says, at the end of the verse, and many among the peoples of the land became Jews. And the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. Oh, I like this, I like this, I like this. That's like saying many sinners got saved. Many non-Christians became Christians. In other words, when they saw what God was doing for his people, they said, we want some of that. So to become a Jew meant you had to come under the Jewish covenant. To come under the Jewish covenant, you had to accept the Jewish God. So they said, we want some of that. God may put you in a bad situation so that he gives you a supernatural deliverance so that other folk want to attach to the God who delivered you because they want some of this. They want to see God do for them what he's done for you. There was a spiritual reversal when people saw what God can do. I wish I could be a preacher who told you, come on, come to God and there'll be no enemies. Come to God and there'll be no bad days. Come to God, there'll be no lean years. Come to God, there'll be no disappointments. Come to God, there won't be any bad employees. I wish I could tell you that, but I'd be lying to you. It's all through scripture. But I can tell you this, whatever it is doesn't have the last say. It's throwing dirt at you. Reversal. He was in the Birmingham jail, but you go to Washington, D.C., you'll see a monument. Nelson Mandela had a reversal. He was put in jail, but then he became head of South Africa because God is a God of reversal. Oh, but there's one reversal bigger than all of that because Satan thought he had Jesus on the cross. When he hung him high and stretched him wide, it looked like Satan had won. But early Sunday morning, just a little while before day, God raised Jesus up and he said, all power is in my hands. God is a God of reversal. So you hang on to him even though Satan is throwing dirt at you. Our world is consumed with the concept of luck. Chance happenings that just kind of take place. People will regularly say, boy, you sure are lucky. Or the opposite, something is bad luck. But the book of Esther says that there is no such thing as luck. There is providence. God causing or allowing things and events to work toward his purposes. Esther has been promoted to be queen. Mordecai has told her that Haman wants to kill all of the Jews. And it's now time for you to go to your husband, King Ahasuerus, and tell him Haman's plot against the Jews. Esther has said, I can't do that. It's too risky. I love y'all, but not that much. Because to go before him when he has not requested me could cost me my life. Mordecai has said to her, don't you know that you are called to the kingdom for such a time as this? That you were only put up here in this royal position because God knew this moment, your moment would be now. Don't miss your moment, girl. This is your moment to be a tool of God to deliver God's people. When she hears that message from Mordecai, she says, okay, I want all of y'all to go on a 3-day fast. I need y'all on your knees for this one because this is a big one. You're asking me to risk it all, and I'm going to go do it, and if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die, because you're right. This is bigger than just me. Chapter 5 opens up on the 3rd day, because it was a 3-day fast. Esther puts on a royal robe. She goes to the inner court of the king. The king is sitting on his throne. When the king sees her in verse 2, he extends the scepter, which means it's okay for her to come in and talk to him. She comes near, touches the top of the scepter out of respect, and then the king says to her, what is troubling you, verse 3, Queen Esther? And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it will be given you. Just tell me what you want. Esther says in verse 4, if it pleases the king, may the king and Haman, who is out to kill the Jews, come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. I'm going to tell you around dinner. I'm going to fix your favorite food. We're going to lay it out, and I want you to bring Haman, and I'm going to tell you then what's going on around dinner. You will never get to see God's providence at work in your circumstances until and unless God sees you move in accordance with his will. The reason she prays first is because she needs to know how to approach this dangerous situation. She needs some divine insight in a difficult problem. So she goes to God in fasting. And this was a life and death issue. So she needed her antenna raised to hear what God had to say about this situation. The second thing he needs you to do is take a step of faith. But she couldn't just say, I'm a fast, I'm a pray, and I'm going to wait on God. No, she was instructed to go before the king. She had to take a step of faith. So she trusts God. She believes God. She prays to God. And then she makes a risky step because there are no guarantees in advance. What does she get in return? Well, so far, what she gets is a plan. The plan is, I'm going to take my husband to dinner and I'm going to tell him to invite my enemy, Haman. In other words, I'm going to get Haman on home court advantage. I got to get Haman on my territory. He says, okay, it's a banquet. It's a dinner. Okay, bring Haman to dinner and let's go from there. So she invites her husband and her enemy to dinner. Guess who's coming to dinner? So, the banquet is prepared. And they drank their wine, verse 6, at the banquet. So this is a big dinner party for her husband. And the king said to Esther, what is your petition? Okay, you brought me here to dinner. You done fed me good. What do you want? For it shall be granted to you. And I mean, I'm going to do it big, because whatever your request, even the half of the kingdom, it will be done. I'm going to take care of you. What did you make this dinner for? Ooh, it's getting tricky now. Verse 7. So Esther replied, my petition and my request is. My petition and my request is, watch this, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I have prepared for them tomorrow. Say what? The man just told you he gonna give you half the kingdom. What you want, girl? She says, king, my request is, can we have dinner tomorrow? Wait a minute. She made the dinner to make her request to save the people from the genocide of Haman. She's got them both sitting there. Dinner is fine. They've been doing their drinking. Everybody's ready to go. He's offered her the kingdom. What do you want? And she says, what I want is for you to come to dinner tomorrow. Something happened between verse 6 and 8 to cause her to change her mind about making her petition. She changes her mind because she doesn't even finish the sentence. She just jumps to, let's do this again tomorrow. So I know your question is, what changed her mind? She pauses and says, come back tomorrow. Something is happening here. Well, Haman is now smelling himself. Because Haman went out, verse 9, glad and pleased of heart. He's saying, whoa. He says, boy, I was invited to eat with the king and his wife. Boy, I'm really rising on the ladder here. The problem is when he goes out, he runs into Mordecai. Verse 9. And Mordecai would not stand up, not respect him. The man is out to kill him. Mordecai's not going to stand up. Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. So he already doesn't like him. Man, he really ticked off because I didn't come from this party with the king, with the queen. I'm standing before you and you don't recognize who I am, and they just invited me to be with them. You don't know who I am? So he is ticked off, but he controls himself. Verse 10, he doesn't let it. He goes home and tells his wife. He says, wife, Zeresh, he says, let me tell you about my day. I am the man. I am the man. Look, I'm rich. We got these 10 sons. He says, verse 11, and the king magnified me and promoted me, and I'm above all the servants. And then guess what, baby? Verse 12, Esther, the queen, had me, no one but me come to be with the king to eat dinner. Oh, yeah, I'm boss. I'm the boss man, girl. I am on it. This is my day. But there is one problem. All this doesn't matter to me because this Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate. And I can't stand it. I can't take it any longer. So his wife Says, look, we got to get rid of Mordecai. You build the gallows, and we're going to kill him tomorrow. We're going to kill him. During that night, chapter 6, verse 1, the king could not sleep. This is just not a regular night. This is on a particular night. Insomnia sets in. And so the king needs help to go to sleep. So according to verse number 1, he tells his servant, go get me something boring to read. God is so detailed in his coincidences. He leads the servants to the right book. And he makes them read the right page. And on the page that they read, it was found written, verse 2, what Mordecai had reported concerning Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. That goes all the way back to chapter 2 when Mordecai uncovered an assassination plot against the king, and it just happened to be written in the book, in the Chronicles, on the page from the book that he had them read that night, not a night, that night he could not sleep. Okay, I know it's just luck. I know it's just chance. I know it's just something that just kind of happened. I got that. So he's reading the book because of his insomnia. And it just happens that when they hit Mordecai, king said, whoa. You've been reading all these names and all these events, but this guy Mordecai, he saved my life, right? Yeah, king. Well, tell me, verse 3, how did we honor him? How did we tell him we appreciate him for saving the king's life? Servant said, we didn't do anything for him. What? You see, God's providence is tied to time. Even though the time may go over years. Because this is years. Even though you thought something should happen 5 years ago or 8 years ago, but God is doing more than just you. He's doing a series of things at the same time because his kingdom is bigger than just you. You are not the kingdom. You are a representative in the kingdom to be used by the kingdom for the kingdom, but you're not the only one in the kingdom. And so timing becomes everything. And so now we find ourselves with on the day, because night is now past, on the day Mordecai is supposed to die, he's reading a book with Mordecai's name in it just because he can't sleep on that night. Okay, watch this. The king asked in verse 4, I hear somebody outside. Who's outside in the court? It's early in the morning. Who would be up this early out there? Who's there? Who's in the court? He asked in verse 4. Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. King's servant say in verse 5, King, behold, Haman is standing at the door. Let him come in. Tell Haman come in. He my number 2 guy. Let him come in. So Haman came in. And the king said to him, what is to be done for the man who the king desires to honor? Dum 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 dum. What is to be done with the man who the king decides to honor? Now, Haman thinks the king is talking about him. Haman thinks the king is talking about him. He's number 2. He's the number 2 guy in the land. We learned that early in the book. So the king says he wants to honor somebody. So Haman, because he's smelling himself. King want to honor me. Okay. Let me go for the gusto. You want to honor somebody, O king? Let me tell you what you should do. Here's what you should do, O king. Bring out the royal robe. Let him wear the king's robe, which the king has worn. Then bring him the horse on which the king rides. Then put a royal crown even on the horse. Then let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princesses, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. And so what happens? The king says, then the king said to Haman, verse 10, take quickly the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew. Dum 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 dum. Yeah, what you just said, I like that, hey. I like that, hey, why don't you go and do it for Mordecai the Jew? My Bernie Mac invitation, not that invitation. Just go ahead and do it for Mordecai the Jew. Listen to me, seriously. God is the God of intersections. He connects things that don't look connectable when it's that night. When the timing is hit just right and everything is looking wrong. See, everything is looking wrong. Mordecai's getting ready to die this morning. Esther has had to shift her plan to another dinner. This is not a good day. But she has gone before God. She has acted in faith. And so she's picking up signals that causes her to delay a dinner. She's picking up signals. So Haman, verse 11, took the robe, took the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horse back through the city square, and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Okay, so let's follow Mordecai. This is the man the king want to honor. That's called making your enemies your footstool. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home mourning with his head covered. Told his wife Zeresh, this is what happened today. This whole thing is reversed. His wife Zeresh says, well, yeah, it looks bad for you, boy. She says, because you've fallen before this Jewish man. You've fallen before this Jewish man. Brothers and sisters, this is 24 hours. So he's walking this Jew around. Okay. Why am I telling you that? Because I'm telling you the providence of God can even address racism. Okay, don't miss me. The providence of God, because we got racism. He wants to genocide all of the Jews because they are Jewish. It was religion, but it was racism. They were Jewish. The providence of God can handle racism. It was the providence of God in 1955 when a woman named Rosa Parks who happened to be on the bus, happened to have a man talk to her. She happened to not be willing to get up, which led to a civil rights movement, which changed the laws of the land. God knows how, when he gets the right people with the right faith at the right time in the right place to do the right thing, to flip the script even racially. Okay. It's about 1969, maybe, around 1969. One of my professors in college asked me to go to a church with him, to his church around 1969. I went with my professor. I go inside the church, and when I walk out of the church, all hell breaks loose because blacks were not allowed in the church. My professor didn't agree with that. He asked me when I would go. I went. I didn't know all this. So I went, and the church went into convulsions. Because this is, coming off the civil rights era and all that. And they went into convulsions over this black man coming into the church. So they had a meeting about what the church's official position was going to be. And there was a split among the leaders and among the congregation. On the Sunday that I went, they had a guest preacher who was candidating to be their new pastor. I didn't know who was going to be preaching, but he was candidating to be their new pastor. He preached. They had all planned to bring him in. He found out their position in light of me going to the church. He wrote the church and says, I cannot pastor a racist church. So he said, I'm not coming to this church. That split the church even more. From that day forward, the church began to go downhill, 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 until it became a glorified Bible study. 5 years ago, I get a phone call from the chairman of the deacon board. He says, our church has never recovered from that day you came with the professor. And we recognize the reason God has not answered our prayers, the reason God has not rebuilt our church, is because of the racism that we did to you way back in 1969. So I have been asked on behalf of the deacons to call you to apologize to you for the racism we did to you back in 1969. And I have calling you, and I'm humbly requesting, would you come preach? Because God knows the right time to turn a situation around. I'm trying to tell you, you don't know who you're dealing with.